Hey guys, welcome back to the Retro Redux. Today, it ain't a superhero movie, it's barely a science fiction movie. It's really more of a, I don't know how to describe this, the best movie ever. Well, or maybe the sequel is. This is just a really fun movie that I enjoy. Today, we're talking about Scooby Doo.
Wait, what do you mean Melvin do? Feel the impact.
Now, after breaking up, Mystery Incorporated is forced to team up once again after being invited to an island theme park by the owner, who's noticed weird happenings with his customers. Now, this is based off of the fabled cartoon, What's New Scooby Doo, or Where Are You Scooby Doo, Where Are You, whatever. There's so many Scooby Doo cartoons, and it's weird. I have such a weird relationship with Scooby Doo. This kind of falls into the same tier in my life as like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, where I'll tell myself, I'm not the biggest Scooby Doo fan, I'm not the biggest Ninja Turtle fan, but then I look back at all the things that I've watched and enjoyed from this IP, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I'm actually that. I'm just not a super fan. I don't remember every single episode or all the names of all of the TV shows and movies, but the ones I do remember, like Cyber Chase, the live action films, a couple of the cartoons here and there, I vehemently enjoyed. You know, the live action movies, well, the first two at least, do a really good job of adapting its source material, and to be quite honest with you, I'm here to really make the argument, I guess you could say, how this may be the most loyal live action adaptation of anything ever. I'm sure there are other things that I could look across and maybe get to, but for me, what I could remember when it comes to this movie and the series that it's based on, this is almost like a one-for-one copy of it. Now, overall, when it comes to the movie itself, it feels like a slightly over-budget Disney movie, which is something that I can appreciate. I grew up enjoying some of the Disney movies and how cheap the presentation for some of them could have been. I wasn't really super mad at it, and here it feels the same way. The tone itself is also very reminiscent of the show in all of its corny ways, but still something that could be appreciated. For example, they still get off the would have gotten away with it too.
Weren't for you meddling kids and you dumb dog.
Or don't go to that spooky castle moment from the voodoo guy, and you know, Velma's lost glasses, finding out the monster that you're playing with its mask and its face is actually a real monster, not just a dude in disguise, and even the infamous tagline of the entire show, Scooby Doo, where are you? It captures the charm of its source material in a ton of ways, mainly aesthetically. For example, I would probably point to the most, other than the performances of some of the Mystery and gang. The costumes are the best reasoning behind why this is, in my opinion, one of the most loyal adaptations of anything. They just take the costumes straight from the cartoon and it works. Like, for real, comic book fans would cream their sheets if comic book adaptations would be this loyal to their source material visually. Instead of it being a haunted castle or a haunted mansion, it's an amusement park, and it isn't really haunted. They're being manipulated in a sense into believing something way more sinister is going on when there actually is something way more sinister going on, way more fantasy, way more science fiction-y in the background. But the haunted ride is such a ridiculous moment in the film. It's such a ridiculous set piece. Like, why is this ride actually dangerous for them? And not in the sense of like, oh, the machinations and the materials backstage, like they're not aware of what's going on. They could really hurt themselves. It's really like, no, the obstacles that you will face as someone who gets on the ride could kill you for some reason. There's also demon food that like comes alive and actually attacks Scooby and Shaggy for some reason. They never really explain how that works. Daphne, Velma, and Fred also nearly die for some reason. And also, I gotta say, this movie got me with the charm of the early 2000s soundtrack. They got Outkast on it, who made an original song for it called Land of a Million Drums, and that is a banger.
A land of a million drums, there is always something going on.
Welcome to Spooky Island.
And Sugar Ray shows up as actual characters in this movie, and it's a really awkward scene, but the song is fire, so I don't really care. The movie itself clearly wants to be, or is filmed like a slightly adult-oriented adaptation. Now, I'm aware of the history of it, James Gunn's involvement, and how originally there was a little bit of edge to this, not as much as like the internet theorizes, but it was supposed to be maybe a PG, you know, aiming towards towards a slightly older crowd with some innuendos and stuff like that, and you could clearly still feel that. Those drafts are still layered throughout the film. For example, them playing past the Dutch heap on the left-hand side, and there being smoke coming from the Mystery Inc. van, only to cut to it being a grill smoking on the inside of the van, which I thought was a pretty funny joke. There's references to hydrocolonic stuff. Shaggy's love interest in the movie's name is Mary Jane. Now, back to what I was saying about the loyalty to its source material, let's get into the characters.
Whatever the case, Mr. Ink will be there. Solving mysteries, man.
Righting wrongs, looking for clues, and kicking butt.
Scooby Doo is Scooby Doo. One thing that isn't really spoken about is that Scooby Doo isn't voiced by Frank Welker in these movies. He's voiced by Neil Fanning. And to be honest with you, even with Frank Welker being the voice of Scooby Doo for literally all of eternity, I always think of Neil Fanning's voice as Scooby Doo. The special effects aren't really that bad either. He actually fits into the world much better than like other CGI cartoon adaptations with like live action. I think they did a pretty good job with Scooby. Velma, she's played by Linda Cardellini, and to be honest with you, what more can I say? She could fix me. All that simp stuff. Listen, that's me, baby. And also, one thing I gotta say is she is Velma. She is Velma down to a T. Her mannerisms, the way she stands, the way she speaks, her delivery of lines in general, her costume, like I said previously before, her haircut, everything feels and looks like Velma. But if there was anything I would have to criticize about this character, I guess it would be that her love interest is just a guy. Like, I don't remember the dude's name, and I've seen this movie bunches of times. In fact, I don't think they even say the guy. I don't think the dude has a name, and if he does, it was just like in the script. Then we get into Fred, who honestly in this movie, Fred might be like top 3 favorite characters for me, when usually I'm just kind of like whatever on him. But here, he is so funny because he is just so stupid.
Who's the ugly old brother?
People complained about like the Velma Fred, like the Velma show Fred being like the dumbest iteration and how offensive it is. But when you watch this, he might be the dumbest iteration of Fred that we've ever seen. Freddie Prinze Jr. does, however, do a really good job of playing this idiot, who is also a pretty decent leader for the most part. One of my favorite lines is when he tries to pronounce the owner of the park's name and says,
Mr. Mononucleosis?
and also when there's the hypnosis / possession moment and Freddie Prinze Jr. has to act even more like an idiot. He has some really funny lines and moments.
Yo, the biatch was like, what? And I was like, later on. Fred.
Then we get into Daphne, and to be honest with you, this is where some of the criticism actually sets in for me. I think Daphne is probably the least loyal adaptation of her character. Now, if I'm remembering correctly, Velma was the smart one. She was the intelligent one, often the strategist and the person who usually figures out the mystery, while everyone else plays other minor parts in the investigation that fits into a bigger pie of why Mystery Inc. is together. Daphne, often seen as like bait, or even at times someone who can manipulate people into revealing more information when they're out interviewing people for clues and things of that nature. She always did have a part to play in the group, regardless of how, I guess, sexist it may have been depicted at the time. It was never to this level of her being kind of stupid.
What do you mean I can't have 7 carry-on bags? That is so economy.
That?
And also, she's kind of one note and annoying for like the entire time. Now, don't get me wrong, I think Sarah Michelle Gellar is casted perfectly in terms of looking like Daphne. The costume looks great, and her voice and her chemistry, even with Fred, I think all works. But her issue in the movie, feeling like she's underutilized, is just kind of annoying. I love Sarah Michelle Gellar. If you ever seen Cruel Intentions, that I love Sarah Michelle Gellar. Like, listen, she can fix me.
You can put it anywhere.
When we get back, I'm going to step on you.
As much as I might enjoy that,
Then we get to it, the main event, what everyone wants to hear about. Matthew Lillard as Shaggy is arguably a part of the big three of perfect adaptation casting. It would be Matthew Lillard as Shaggy, J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson, and I don't know, Iron Man as Tony Stark. Whoever you have as your third, it doesn't matter because 1 and 2 are Matthew Lillard and J.K. Simmons. Matthew Lillard is Shaggy, like to the point where he became the voice actor for Shaggy in the cartoons and stuff after these movies. He has every verbal and physical mannerism down to a T, from the way that he walks, from the way that he talks, from the way that he'll speak to Scooby Doo specifically, from the way that he'll be terrified and screaming. Everything that he has and does in this movie is Shaggy. Look at the way he's standing in the promotional photo, and you could tell that he had a great time portraying the character and he put his all into it, because if he didn't, he's Shaggy in real life. That's all I gotta say. Now let's get into the villains. First things up, we got Scrappy Doo. Scrappy Doo I always hated as a kid, so it was actually kind of cool, funny, and engaging for him to be portrayed as the villain in this movie, or, well, one of the villains. Well, I guess he is just the villain, just in disguise, or whatever. But yeah, it does come out of nowhere, and it is underdeveloped. It is also just like, hey, man, here's a flashback about this character randomly in the movie, and we never come back to it. It's obvious that that's where it's going. I thought it was fine, and he isn't in the movie long enough to annoy me like how he did in the cartoons. Like, whenever it was the Scooby and Scrappy and Shaggy show where Shaggy had a red shirt, I would never watch an episode. We also get Mr. Rowan Atkinson, aka Mr. Bean, who plays Montevarious, the guy who owns the amusement park. For the most part, it is just Scrappy in disguise, but Rowan Atkinson does portray the character throughout the entire film, and then when the real one shows up near the end, he is also that dude, and he was pretty funny. I thought he's actually a really good generic Scooby Doo, I guess, prime suspect. The intro that he has is actually pretty funny.
Okay.
You seem less
Spooky!
than we'd have guessed.
Oh no, I can be pretty spooky when called upon. Oh, I can go and claws and everything.
Now, there are also a ton of what the fuck moments. For example, Joanna Man, aka Corey Coleman, aka Miguel A. Nunez Jr. shows up as a voodoo maestro, which is kind of racist and also very I guess insensitive, but I didn't mind. He plays a character that would show up essentially in any Scooby-Doo cartoon. Either the old crazy coot who turns out to actually know exactly what he's talking about, a crazy hermit guy or magician or voodoo practitioner. He is that, essentially, the character that tells them like, hey, don't do that, and is also kind of a suspect, but points them in the right direction, actually. There's also the depiction of the Coast Guard, and I don't know, it was just so out of left field, it made me laugh. Same thing when the lead singer from Sugar Ray and obviously the rest of the band are possessed by the demons as well. The scene that he has with Daphne is so awkward and weird. I think the obvious criticism for this movie is that it's pretty vapid. There is nothing to it other than it being a live action episode of Scooby Doo. If this was an episode of Scooby Doo or one of those direct to video animated ones, it would still be just as good to me. The only thing that elevates this past that is the fact that Matthew Lillard and some of the other cast are performing as these characters so well, you kind of forget that this is like a cheesy Disney Channel budget level live action movie. The visuals, I gotta say, are pretty bad. Going back to the costume designs and, the first Velma interview, like, ceremony thing that happens looks really good. But the CGI for the demons and Demon Scrappy near the end is some of the worst CGI I've ever seen in a movie, especially a movie that I like. I forgive the CGI because of how much I enjoyed this movie, but man, it's so bad. So I can only imagine if you don't like Scooby-Doo or you don't like this movie, the demons are probably dog shit water. I'm all for them changing it or doing whatever to this property, and they didn't do anything to this property at all to change it. I think you could easily just say this is in the same universe as any of those shows and it would fit. Now, who's this movie made for?
Me?
Straight up.
But that's pretty much it. I enjoyed this movie a lot. It's a fun movie to watch. It's super inconsequential, almost way too safe at times. But then, like I said, there are some edgy jokes and some great performances that I really enjoy. And this is one of those movies that I feel like I watch every other year or so. Something that I'll never forget and something that I think always feels super energizing for me. It's not a fucking Oscar winner. It's not Oppenheimer or anything. But I will say this: movies like this walked so movies like Barbie could run run. Thank y'all for watching. If you enjoyed this movie and this video, let me know in the comment section down below. Like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I will see you in the next Retro Redux. Bye bye.